Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Level Up with X webinar series hosted by X Venture. I'm Amani Vidanage, and I'll be your host for the day. Before we dive into today's exciting topics, let me give you a brief introduction to our company, X Venture. X Venture is a tech company dedicated to driving innovation and excellence in digital transformation services. Our expertise lies in API transformation programs designed to enhance organizational API capabilities. So, with that being said, let's go with our today's proceedings. We are delighted to have an exceptional lineup of speakers today with us who will be sharing their insights and expertise with us. We warmly welcome Kasun Perera, a lead AI and data engineering expert with over 15 years of industry experience. Kasun has worked across Asia, the Middle East, and Europe, helping organizations adopt AI strategies to drive significant value and streamline operations. So, to start with, he will be discussing on the topic adopting AI strategy in your organization. At the end of our experts' presentation, you'll discover how AI can help companies to stay competitive and to unlock new opportunities. After that, we'll transition it into another interesting session, and that will be our fireside chat. It's our great privilege to have Lisa Schroeder with us today to enrich our fireside chat along with Kasun. Lisa has held leading roles in startups during their expansion into Asia and has extensive experience in collaborating with financial institutions. She will be sharing her insights on corporate innovations with startups. This fireside chat will enable an open and interactive discussion where our participants can engage lively with our experts today. So why take more time? Without further ado, let's warmly welcome our first speaker, Kasun Perera. Over to you, Kasun.
Thanks, Amani. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this session on adapting an AI strategy and then how, as a corporate or as a startup, partner with for an innovation to bring in and then develop something with a corporate. So I will dive into and adapting an AI strategy. But before that, let me share my screen. Okay, hope everyone can see my screen. Okay, so we're going to talk about adapting an AI strategy, but before that, we all has to look at what is AI actually means, because it may actually have a different meanings for different people, right? So AI essentially means that it's an artificial intelligence. You are trying to do something that we humans do by using machines. So it could be as good as simple as recognizing a picture, recognizing a face, or writing a summary out of a document, so which we as humans normally do, but can we get the machines to do it? So when you actually do that, it's called AI. Part of that AI is machine learning, because for anything, a machine to do something, the machine has to learn. And that is why the machine learning or algorithms in the machine learning comes into picture, where you are making the machine learns from the data the way that humans perform the same task. The machine can perform the same task using the machine learning algorithms. And majority of those machine learning algorithms now, especially in these days with the Gen AI, talks about language. Because if a machine can understand the language just like we humans do, then it has a much more powerful capabilities. So natural language processing or language understanding is a subset of machine learning, where it is primarily focused on the human spoken languages. So, and then you probably have heard about the new term of Gen AI or generative AI. So essentially, AI can do multiple different things. Some simple things like detecting your credit card transactions, whether they are fraudulent or not. So sometimes you get an SMS from your bank saying that there is this transaction and it could be fraudulent, so it has stopped making that particular transaction to your bank account, right? So this is a fraudulent transaction where it's not generating something but detecting whether a transaction is fraudulent or not. That that falls under AI. But at the same time, what if like you're asking a computer to generate an image? You have seen that DALI, and then Anthropic, and even now Meta. You go to your Facebook app or the Messenger app, you can access your Meta and then ask Meta to generate an image, right? So you basically describe the image that you want, and it actually come up with that particular image. Similarly, images, text, voice, music, anything that AI generates, and that entire piece or the field is called generative AI. So that is the world that we are living in. But adapting an AI is sometimes an opportunity, and it may actually comes with a risk as well. So in 2019 survey, MIT and BCG did this survey. Out of 10 companies, 9 companies, so it is like 90% of the companies that they have surveyed said AI gives them a business opportunity. So by using AI, they see that they can actually make a business gain. So this is the belief that most of the companies have that, and I'm sure that is why you are here as well, to know that okay, how AI can actually bring a business value to your organization. But at the same time, most of these organizations or the C-suite also communicated that about 40%, 45% of them have shared that AI actually pose a threat as well. And most importantly, where they actually indicated this threat is coming from is the competitors who's actually using AI. So it is not the AI itself is riskier, but it is the companies who's using AI, and then those competitors may actually outpace you if you are not using AI. So that is the risk that they have seen. Instead of AI itself is a risk. But sometimes, yes, AI itself can be a risk, and then the way that you should use AI in your organization could be multifold. And that is why some companies start adopting AI and then realize that there's not much of a business gain that they have gained from adopting an AI. So 90% of the companies that they have, so in the same survey, what they have communicated is only 40% of them actually have realized that there is a business impact. Maybe it is reducing the cost or a new revenue that is generated by using AI. So some of these companies that have invested in AI, a part of them actually invested significant amount in adopting AI. Even if you invest significant amount to adopt AI, only 60% of those who have invested significantly see that there is some business gains. So what's wrong with this? What's wrong of, I have money, I put like 500K dollars of adapting AI, but I'm not seeing the value. So where's the problem is? So maybe we are actually putting this money or the investment in the wrong place or in the wrong time to realize a business use case with AI. So investing AI or just pouring money into an AI project doesn't necessarily give you a success. So that is why when you are putting in money into AI, you need to come up with a portfolio approach. So I think most of you are familiar with the word portfolio. Say, for example, if you are investing in a stock market, or you have your investments in other places, real estate or bonds and so on. So you try to create a portfolio where you actually have a risk mitigated or your risk is diversified. You're not putting all your money into a one account or a one equity, right? So you try to have a balance, and you try to have a balance in a way that you have quick wins, likes of short-term investment, and then you also have long-term investments. So short-term investment, you may actually have a lesser risk and then lesser gains as well. Long-term investment may be a higher risk, but also a higher return. So similarly, when you are adapting an AI strategy to your organization, you need to think about the same perspective. How can I actually create a portfolio where I have a mix of a short-term quick wins and then long-term wins as well? Why do we actually need to have these short-term wins versus a long-term wins? Because as a company, you may not necessarily have an experience with AI, and then what are the capabilities of AI? and are there any limitations, and then whether some people are receptive to AI and some people are being a bit more not receptive, like they see that the AI is challenging or AI might actually replace my job, so I will not actually work with AI, right? So that is why you really need to get everyone on board when you're making a long-term investment for a higher return. But by having a quick wins, like a small projects, or projects that have a quick wins, or internal touch points, having that would make everyone on board in, okay, AI is not as bad as I think, and AI actually can give better returns. And at the same time, you also understand the limitations of AI. Sometimes people do have a very high expectations from the AI, but by getting them familiar with the capabilities of AI, you bring those expectations down for a long-term investments. So when you're actually creating an AI portfolio, the right balance is you're having few quick wins and then one or two longer term projects as well. So few quick wins that you can actually do is usually optimization at smaller touch points. I will go through like a couple of examples of quick wins versus the long term projects as well. So mostly it should be focused on the quick win should be focused on optimizations or efficiency gains for a smaller business unit. So if you are a bank, maybe you are looking at just one unit in the bank. Maybe it is loan underwriting, or it could be for some efficiencies in terms of customer care. So that could be a very smaller business unit. And then you pick a one use case in that business unit and you try to bring in AI into that business unit. Versus a long-term project could be you're looking at the entire picture of onboarding an industrialized customer. So a bigger customer, not like you and me, we are retail customers, more of a company, onboarding a company into a bank and then facilitating them a loan. Those loans are in the millions or billions, right? So you're doing like a lot of analysis in terms of company analysis to support that kind of a loan. So that could be an entire process. So let's get into quick wins. So if you are to do a quick win project, you don't have much time, right? Because you have a short time, 3 to 6 months. And then you may not necessarily have all the data, and you have a smaller user persona. And sometimes you may not even have enough people, data scientists and data engineers to work on such projects. So your best chance is when you're actually working with a smaller project is getting some off-the-shelf tools and packages. So you can use things like AutoML, where you don't necessarily need to know the data science concepts. You just plug the data in, let the model picks up, or let the AutoML framework picks up the best working model and then give you the output, right? You don't have to be a data scientist to use such tools. And then over time, this may actually improve some smaller customer touch points or user touch points. And that exposes the organization and the users in the organization to the potentials of AI and then also the risk and limitations of AI, right? And that helps you build consensus among, okay, what AI can do, what AI cannot do, and then bring the entire organization into a consensus. This is one of the examples that we recently went through in my organization. So we have been talking to a futures trading company. So this is investment related. And their C-suite is quite a positive on adopting AI. Right? It's an organization about 150, 160 people. And they are managing about a billion plus money under their portfolio. Right. So what they actually wanted to do is how they transform as a company as a whole to serve their customers well through a power of a Gen AI chatbot, where a customer, instead of interacting with their internal agents, customer interact with a chatbot. And by doing so, they thought that they can actually serve more customers and then serve customers better than their human agents. But there was skeptics within the organization where internal agents were very skeptic about this in terms of AI, the impact of AI, whether that is really going to solve the problem that they have, and then can they actually increase the number of customers that they serve. And also internally, they also had an kind of worry about the job impact. Okay, whether this is going to replace my job, right? So that was, and this is actually long-term project. If you aren't invest in such a project, the risk is high. What if that things can go wrong with this kind of a chatbot, right? So instead of that, what we actually did is first make the company understand that the AI is here. And then if you are actually using AI, you will be better off compared to an organization that is not using AI. So we had a workshop with them to make the entire company understand what is AI, what are the limitations of AI. And then we actually did a smaller project. This project was about a 2 month project where we pick a smaller use case. These current agents, they are working on and calling those customers and then trying to make them invest more money into their company through the trading. But they don't know which customers to call and which customers not to call. And they don't have a way to specify, okay, this set of customers are more likely to invest. So that let's go and then like pick them to get like more revenue, right? So, but we came up with a very simple LSTM model by looking at those customers' past transactions and which portfolios that they have invested in, which kind of futures that they have invested in and traded. And it's a very simple classification problem. And it's just a 2 months work. We use standard tools like Azure AI and AutoML to come up with and classification model to specify, okay, this set of customers are more likely to invest, so you better target them. So the output of these models were actually for the internal agents. So it is internally consuming AI adoption. It's a very small use case. And then those employees then use this output to call the customers and then make them invest with them, right? And by doing so, they realized, okay, AI is not necessarily actually replacing my job over here. It is just augmenting my job and then helping my job. And then even if we have a Gen AI powered chatbot, it's not everything is going to do by the chatbot. It is only a limited part that they can actually automate. They still need the agents to handle the rest remaining part of executing transactions and so on, right? So that is how we actually go by looking at a short-term, quick project that you can use to adapt AI. So this particular company never had any other AI tools internally using, apart from the trading, of course. But so the users didn't have any understanding about the benefits of AI, the limitations of AI, and so on. So this is how we actually looked at a quick win. So some of the other some example quick wins could be, say, for example, you are working with a pharmaceutical company, and then it could be pharmacies or the pharmacists that are working there, and people come with different prescriptions. And sometimes your pharmacy may not necessarily have um, a way to look at, what are the different substitute drugs for any particular prescribed drug that is there in the prescription, right? So these pharmacies might actually go through some kind of a tool or an internal platform to find out what are the different drugs that can be substituted. Instead of that, you can actually create a voice assistant where through your mobile or something, and you can use off-the-shelf models and off-the-shelf tools. Voice recognition is pretty staple right now. There are multiple different tools available, and then like looking at the voice to text and then text matching to get a substitute drug, which is very easy thing to do as long as you have a mapping of a drug to other substitute drugs. It's simple database search that you need to do, and implementing this tool is quite easy. You can do it in just a couple of weeks time, right? So that could be an easy way for the people to get used to, like, what are the quick wins that we can get from AI, right? Another one would be even if you are a bank, as I explained earlier, um, the bank may actually get like a lot of calls from their customers, right? And instead of going through a longer process of serving the entire customer query through AI, what if like you just use the AI to summarize the customer call and then give the action points to the customer care agent. So you're not necessarily replacing the customer care agent, you are just making the life easier for the customer care agent. This is a very smaller touch point. The benefit that you're getting is just on the efficiency side. So it's not much of a quick win in terms of dollar value, but it actually gets the customers or the internal users used to the AI usage. And another one could be building up a simple contract review dashboard through AI where you get a contract, you just check whether all the information that should be there in the contract is there. Do we have a contingency plans? Do we have the necessary terms, the key terms, and so on, right? So this could be like very simple, quick wins that you can build with off-the-shelf tools that you have. Okay, so because of the time is actually running out, I will very quickly go through long-term projects. So when you're working on a long-term project, you have a much larger investment. So the company has to be ready to be invest a bit more money on a long-term projects. What that means is it is not a smaller business unit that is trying to invest some money in AI adoption. It is the entire organization. So you basically need the C-suite buying in of the value that you can actually build using the AI solution, right? And then you probably need like bigger team. You need the business users. You need the technical team. So it's a cross-functional team that you need to come up with this particular project, right? And it also need to align with the overall AI strategy and the business strategy that the company has. And so you need these dedicated resources for a long term because these projects are about 1.5 years, and sometimes these projects could be even 2 years. So you need to have these resources so for a long time. It's not like a very quick hires that you can do and then you can let them go 3 to 6 months later. Right? You need to have these resources for a long time. An example of such a long-term project could be a complete suite of claim management using AI. So it could be as something like, let's say, a car made an accident. The insurer take a picture, upload that claim through taking like a couple of pictures of the car and the accident, and then on the back end, on the insurance side, it is taking all this information and then looking at the damage to the car automatically and then determining what could be the claim it should be. So it could be smaller claims to the larger claims. It could be $100 claim, it could be $1,000 claim, or it could be a $10,000 claim, right? So for your AI system to come to a substantial accuracy at each of these different levels of claims, it has to have a pretty good high accuracy rate. Otherwise, the risk is very high for the insurance company, right? And by doing so, by adapting this, you may not necessarily start looking at the entire suite of claims, entire set of claims, and automating everything at once. You probably need to look at, okay, let's start automating the claims that are below $500, which is probably like higher in number, but an individual claim wise, the risk is not that high for the organization, right? And then by doing so, you probably be automating about 50%, and then eventually you try to increase it to 70, 80, even 90% of the claims. And not every claim can be automated. Entire process could be automated. So you probably still need to have a complex structure for the complex claims. You do the manual intervention of actual claim agents, right? So that is a long-term project. It's a change management that you need to do. So you really need to think about when you're doing long-term projects, how to handle the change management as well. And now that in order to use the AI, the barriers are really, really low. You don't need very dedicated hardware. You can go to any cloud platform and then use these hardwares if you want to train your models. Then for the softwares, most of the software that is right now everyone uses is open source. So open source like TensorFlow, PyTorch, and all that is readily available, freely available. So all this actually lower the barrier. So on the other hand, the data and algorithms is also out there. So if you want to train a model in terms of image recognition, the data is out there. If you want to do an insurance claim analysis, the data is out there on platforms like Kaggle and Algorithmia and so on. So it is very, very easy for you to build an AI model right now. And what that means is you don't necessarily need to have those resources front loaded. You don't necessarily need to have the data acquired, the data scientist acquired or hired, and so on. Even a simple software engineer can actually use these tools right now, use this data right now to come up with simple AI use cases. Um, One of the other things about AI is looking at the software. They're being open source skills. There are plenty of tools, low code tool, no code tool. For the computation, you can rent the computation right now, and then data, more data that you have. You don't necessarily need to have the label data as well with the deep learning and so on. You don't need the label data. You just pour the data in to these deep learning models, and then it comes out with the answer, right? And then AutoML really help you not have data scientists at all, and any software engineer who can configure the things can actually get an AI pipeline running pretty fast. Yep. So that is what I wanted to share with you very quickly. So if you have any questions, feel free to send them over chat. But the second part of this conversation is we are getting into, now that we know that there is how to adapt an AI strategy into an organization, looking at the short-term, long-term projects, but how to operationalize it through collaborations.
Thank you, Kasun, for that insightful presentation. I hope the audience would have gained a lot through what you shared. So, if I just quote a nice sentence which you mentioned in your discussion, like AI is not a risk, but if you don't use AI, you will be at risk. I think that's what I felt like it's the essence, because that's how we have to think. If we are not going to adapt according to the changes, we are at risk. So, I think it was an insightful session. So now we are going to move on to our second phase, that is about the fire. We are going to move on to the fireside chat. So corporate innovations with startups. This is a topic of growing importance as traditional financial institutions and other large corporations seek to leverage the agility and the innovative capabilities of startups. So this is why we thought of bringing in this topic as well for our webinar today. As I mentioned before, we'll be going to the fireside chat now, and we have with us our fintech expert, Lisa Schroeder. We warmly welcome you, Lisa. And now,
Thank you, Amani.
hello. So I hope that the participants would raise their questions. So this is a great opportunity for you to interact with experts at this moment, so you can clear your doubts and ask your questions. And don't miss this opportunity. Definitely make use of it. So I have some questions lined up for this. So we'll go with the first question. So when it comes to startups, so both of you can answer. How can startups collaborate effectively with financial institutions to drive innovation in fintech?
Maybe I can take this first, Amani. Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks, Kasun, for this great introduction. I think it's super useful to understand how such emerging technologies find adoption. And that's also how corporates usually think about collaboration with external parties. And oftentimes those can be startups. So usually when those new emerging technologies appear, of course, some corporates have the manpower internally to conduct certain experiments. But most often there are already startups in the ecosystem that have already tackled some of the pain points in the industry, leveraging those new technologies. And that's, I think, where the huge benefit can be leveraged on both sides. So I want to approach this question in two ways, basically, because obviously the the first crucial point is how to even get in touch with a corporate. So I'm speaking from the startup perspective now. So assuming that I think most of the audience is probably representing or running their own startup. So to get your foot in the door, that's obviously one of the first challenges that you'll face if you decide to start working with a large organization. And there's various ways of how to kind of get that foot into the door and get in touch with the corporates. So I just want to name a few. Obviously, there's many channels, but I think it's important to highlight that there are available channels that you can consider. And first and foremost, I think it's accelerators, external accelerators that you probably are aware of, like Plug and Play or Accenture Fintech Lab here in APAC. They're super active to connect startups with corporate partners for the financial services industry specifically. And those are great ways to kind of get in touch with corporates because they have already indicated an interest in collaborating with startups. There's also ecosystem facilitators, which are a slightly larger scope, so to speak. They're usually like fintech associations, for example. So it's more of a knowledge hub that gets established in a specific country or city. So you can also think of kind of marketplaces for technology solutions that you can also be present at and then kind of be recognized by corporates through that, such as like the Google, Amazon, or AWS specifically, and Microsoft for startup programs. So those are usually the easiest gateways to also get in touch with corporates because usually corporates kind of trust those platforms already. So it's a lot easier to then adopt external third-party solutions from startups as well. Then obviously it's also always intriguing to kind of look into the corporate innovation labs or venture units. So they obviously indicate that they would like to work with external parties, and that provides a great opportunity to have dedicated points of contacts within the corporate to really identify which are the right audiences within the financial institutions or large corporation to be connected with. Investments, when you seek investment from corporate venture funds or even independent venture funds, they usually are in close contact with large corporations as well and connected, so they might be able to make the introduction as well. And then in some cases, there are regulatory sandboxes, which obviously are very safe environments for testing new solutions, both for you as a startup, but also for the corporate to understand how a new solution can actually work. And then, well, if you're lucky enough that you already have your direct connection in a corporate, then lucky you. A direct partnership is obviously the desired way, but that's not always feasible, unfortunately. But yeah, that leads me kind of to my next element of, well, once you've got that foot in the door, what are the aspects to consider for a successful partnership? Well, first of all, it's timing. You might already start working on a great solution. You have identified this as a pain point in the industry, but some of the corporates might not have recognized that this is definitely such a pressing issue they need to solve today. So while your solution might be actually the perfect solution for them, they might not recognize it yet, but kind of stay consistent and stay persistent to be visible in the industry. So once the corporate actually realizes that there is a solution out there that's already tested and proven, then they might kind of catch your attention. Then very important is strategic alignment. So for corporates and startups to work successfully together, you really need to identify one specific pain point that you're trying to solve to get started, because you can develop that partnership over time, but initially the first use case has to be very, very specific for the corporate, big enough to go out and take the risk of solving that with an external party, and for you small enough to not overextend yourself as well, to not overpromise as you go along, and maybe even secure that first proof of concept, a POC, but really make sure that you have the strategic alignment by setting clear goals and also and achievable goals, I want to say, but also kind of keep in touch regularly, even when you agreed on that POC. Don't wait until the end of that POC to present what you've developed, but really make sure in an agile way that you have regular catch-ups where you define, is this still in scope? Does this still make sense? Is this still what you want to achieve here? just to not end up after a 6-month period and realize, well, actually we've put in a lot of resources into developing a use case with a corporate, but there's no desire to move forward because it has not been the solution that the corporate wanted or had in mind. Yeah, so I really want to emphasize kind of be prepared for a long sales cycle. So especially if you go into that B2B business case, if you've developed a B2B business model, then be prepared to talk to one corporate for a long time. So that's why I also would like to highlight that it's very important to build a whole pipeline of partnerships. So don't just focus on one, even though you might have come from that company, you know it's a pain point, you try to sell the new solution back to your previous employer, but maybe they're not ready yet. I mean, there was a reason why you left the company to build that solution. So maybe also make sure that other companies out there might be suitable partners for you. And I stop here. I think I'm entering a monologue here.
Yeah, that's really fascinating to hear from you, Lisa, that potential in collaboration. So anything from your side, Kasun, would you like to add?
So yeah, I think I can speak from both sides where I have worked with the banks as a startup and then done POCs where I have also made mistakes. And something that Lisa bring up is, regular checks, make it agile, but at the same time, don't let the scope creep because, when you're actually working with a bank or a big corporate, they're most likely to ask like many different things from you, even when you agree on a particular scope at the beginning. Then they start like, can you actually do this? Can you actually do that? And then you as a startup don't have much say, right? So you may actually feel that, I don't have much say. Okay, let me actually take it. But at the same time, then you are spread too thin and you will not be able to prove and then prove one specific use case that, okay, this is solvable. This is how we solved for a smaller use case. And this is how we can scale it for larger user base, right? So that is like very important to know. Keep in mind that don't let the scope creep. On the other hand, you also need to realize that these big corporations, they have rigorous frameworks for getting in external vendor, right? So procurement is something that is going to kill your momentum, right? But you should be very persistent, as Lisa said, that convincing your business user who's sponsoring your project would be much easier, but getting through that procurement may be much harder, might actually take longer time. So you really need to persist and then get through that door. On the other hand, the big banks or any financial institution, they are the highest regulated. Probably the most regulated industry in this world is the financial, maybe healthcare, right? So you need to be really ready and have an understanding of what regulations, what risks the company is actually taking, how you can help the person who's investing into your project, how you can help that person to de-risk the things, right? So say, for example, you can mention that, the data is not going out. You're making everything in a virtual private cloud on their cloud or even in your cloud, but the data is not going out, things like that, right? And what are the different measures that you have taken to data governance, AI governance, the continuous monitoring, all of that by helping your champion that is in the organization, you are trying to shorten your sales cycle because otherwise the regulations, the governance team, compliance team gonna put different hurdles in your journey working with the corporates. It's not that the banks don't want to do it, but at the same time they have to take a conscious measure in terms of adopting AI, right? Because it actually comes with risk.
So thank you, Kasun, for sharing your insights as well. So I'll be moving on to my next question. So partnerships and collaborations, just as we discussed before. So how have you approached partnerships and collaborations with larger corporations or institutions to drive innovation?
Maybe I'll very quickly go through because then Lisa can actually talk a lot. I mostly go through what I have done in my startups is attend hackathons, and that is how we got to know each other as well. So from the hackathons, it opened up the doors to a couple of other sponsors that they had, and then from there it is more corporate partners that you actually trying to it's like a snowballing, right? So you get to like one part, and then from there you try to like make the connections, like getting familiar with the who's going to be the winner or the your champion in the organization, trying to reach to that person and then try to convince, right? That is one way. The other way is like getting into the accelerators. And from all of these connections, you try to find your champion in the organization, right? So that's normally what we have done. And my experience with Julius Baer is by going through this program, I was managed to find a champion in Julius Baer, then who would much more of a connection, would open the doors to Julius Baer and then got us through the procurement by fast tracking the procurement process as well. So we managed to get through procurement in a week's time, where normally any other organization would take about 3 months to get through. Right. So that is how you actually need to make those connections and then have those connections warm. It took about 5 months for us to keep it warm and then get through that door. But once you are there, then it would be much, much easier.
Yeah, exactly. I like the example that you brought, Kasun, with the hackathon. I kind of missed that in my list earlier. I forgot to mention it. It's hackathons and awards is another channel where you can grab attention from corporates. So especially if it's a corporate award or hackathon, they usually kind of disclose like which areas they are looking to partner with external vendors. So that's a really good way to get noticed. And as Kasun pointed out, like start building a partnership, and partnerships are built on trust, so it takes time. So no contract has been signed in the first meeting, so really prepare for this partnership in the long run. And what I also like that that Kasun pointed out, the corporate champion. So yes, you definitely need to understand who you're trying to solve a problem for, and you really need to listen in the beginning. Try to understand as much as possible from the corporate representatives. If it's a group, if it's one stakeholder, try to be the listener. Don't go into sales mode, even though you already are jumping at, I know I can do this. I know we have it. This is on our product shelf. I've been there. I've worked at a startup as well. We were in the scale up phase, so not the early phases, but really listening to more potential partners, and they were all describing the same issues that we were facing with our early clients. And then at some point we were like, okay, no, we just need to let them kind of rant. Sometimes it's really about kind of being a human in that meeting, being a good listener, because they just want to get across their frustration, and that way you really understand what are the best hooks basically to then build your sales pitch. That might actually be a good clue, because you probably have a variety of services or products that you have built or are about to build. So then you can really jump in with those specific elements, rather than kind of sharing what all the aspects of your fantastic solution that you have built or are envisioning to build. So it's really taking it step by step, even though it's very painful. I understand you want to rush things, you can do it. But especially when it comes to corporates, especially when they're in a regulated environment, yeah, you have to factor other things in. I mean, convincing your corporate champion is one step, but then also understanding how each corporate's compliance system works. Sometimes there's multiple checkpoints, not just one compliance team that you also need to convince to kind of de-risk the projects that you're about to launch, but also understand what legal aspects are there. Do you need other opinions within the organization to get that project approved? So also that will take time to really uncover all those layers of approvals that you will eventually need for the project. But it really pays off if you take the time to understand your counterpart, so to speak. Yeah.
Great advice from both of you. I mean, I think this is where the real value of a webinar comes in, because sharing your experience, it's not like reading blogs or articles. Listening to your experience and learning from them, it's really a great privilege for us. So moving on to our next question, what regulatory considerations should Sri Lankan fintech startups should keep in mind when developing new products or services? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, maybe I can get started on this one, because I think that's definitely always a consideration that you should have in mind, especially when you're thinking about selling or working with financial institutions. And especially if you think about scaling your solution outside of Sri Lanka, then definitely have a look at all the countries in APAC, what their stance is on various technologies. And especially now that we talk about AI, Gen AI, all the regulators here in APAC are still figuring out how to treat it. So most of them luckily take a more of a collaborative approach. They actually do invite industry projects between startups and financial institution, or between two financial institutions, to learn how that technology will be impacting the industry as a whole. So yeah, India has been going back and forth on how to treat AI, whether they need official approval or not. Now they've gone back to like, no, let's wait and see, and every model has to be kind of tested and looked at individually, but we don't want to hinder innovation. And similar in Singapore, there's this very step-by-step approach where the regulator here invites participants to join industry projects that they are launching. Similar in Hong Kong, they have a sandbox, for example, they make available to test AI models and specific use cases. And I think that's one aspect you should think about, or the fact that you might need licensing depending on what type of product you're building or solution. We've been in touch with a company that has been building financial products based on an AI model, and in their respective country, they were leveraging their partners licensing. But when they would have when thinking about expanding to Singapore, they would definitely have to get their own license. They cannot just leverage a partner's license for issuing or distributing financial products, because somebody has to be liable for those financial products to be safe for consumption by either retail or institutional investors, for example. So yeah, definitely take a look at regulations, guidelines that are issued by regulators. Obviously not the most exciting reading materials, but definitely saves you trouble in the long run if you keep up to date of what applies to your respective business.
Yeah, I think I completely align with you, Lisa. And then one good thing about MAS is like they sometimes actually come up with like very clear guidelines or regulations itself. These are the things that you should practice on. And in things like Gen AI, very recently, no regulator actually came up with like comprehensive list of, okay, these are the requirements that anyone should meet. It mostly comes as guidelines, and things could actually change later. So you should be actually ready on your approach too as well. Sometimes there could be more regulations coming in. Sometimes it could be like lesser regulations coming in, right? Generally, MAS, Monetary Authority of Singapore, is kind of lenient on their regulations compared to, let's say, in US. Right, the US banks are highly regulated compared to the banks over here in terms of adoption of AI and then data platforms. So I think your first go-to point would be regulator in a particular jurisdiction, and then looking at what regulations that they have come up with for AI and ML solutions and data governance as well.
One thing I forgot to mention is government grants, for example. So usually in this part of the world, a lot of regulators obviously try to position themselves as the technology hub for something. So Singapore is very much doubling down on fintech, specifically now also AI, quantum computing also suddenly a theme. So that's also an indication of what the regulator is basically looking after or is more favorable towards. Also check out different grant schemes. Hong Kong, very similar. They also offer a couple of startup programs that come with some financing as well.
Thank you both for your thoughtful responses. So, although I have a set of lined up questions, with the limited time, I think we can go ahead with one more question. So, how should startups position their first POC, proof of concept engagement, and how can they transition it into a long-term partnerships? What do you think about that?
Lisa, you want to take it first?
Sure. I think, as mentioned before, it's kind of really actively listen to your counterpart when you are in the position that you signed your first POC. Ideally, I would recommend to try to get a paid POC. I know a lot of organizations are always asking for free POCs, so no chargeback for you. But depending on the scope, if it's a 6-month project, definitely paid. There's resources going into it on your end. So even though there might be a carrot dangling at the end of it, basically coming with the opportunity to sign a long-term contract, it might not happen. So make sure you at least get your costs covered. That also shows that your solution or your collaboration has value. So literally a dollar value attached to it might also make a difference for corporate to take you seriously. If it's a short one, obviously you're free to use it as a sales opportunity to get the foot in the door and prove yourselves. That definitely also works. And then, as Kasun also elaborated to earlier, don't overextend yourself. Don't get the scope broadened and broadened as you go through the first POC, but actually be firm and say no. What is within scope? What is out of scope? Because the out of scope things can actually be additional projects further later on. So those are definitely things you should take a note of, because those are also pain points for the corporate, and you might be able to upsell to another project, which eventually could potentially develop into a longer term commercial agreement.
I think my point would be we have to, from startup side as well as the corporate side, come to a mutual agreement. What is a proof of concept means? It is proving a particular concept that is working. It is not a full-fledged product. It doesn't has to have like a full scalability, not super user friendly, but you are proving that it is actually working for a smaller use case, for a smaller set of users, right? So that is the first thing. The second thing is you pick a use case where it is solvable. Don't let the scope creep in. Have a dollar value. Most importantly, have what is the success criteria of that POC. Define that success criteria at the beginning of the POC, or at least like first month. If the POC is about 3 months, define at least in the first month and then work towards the success criteria. If possible, attach what happens next. If as a startup, if you meet those success criteria, what happens next? Is there a long-term contract? Try to put that also in your POC contract. If we actually meet these criteria, at least there is an engagement for a long-term project, or maybe it is automatically moving to a long-term project, right? Maybe a 1-year contract, things like that. So try to put that as well. But it is very, very important to have the success criteria. And at the end of the POC, you can go with the success criteria, say that, hey, we have agreed on this one. I have met this. It is successful. So POC is successful. What you want to take next?
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you for those valuable tips. I think definitely our participants will certainly benefit from these strategic insights. So with that, we'll be moving on to our Q&A session. So we encourage you to ask any questions. I think we have one question in the chat. We can go ahead with that. Given your extensive experience in AI and data engineering, what are the most promising AI technologies you believe will shape the future of corporate innovation? So,
Okay, so I don't necessarily see that one particular technology is going to change the world, right? Or it is going to change how the corporate innovation works. So it is a combination of all of these factors. So a technology is just a tool only. How it is actually being applied would be the one that is going to change. And everyone talks about the Gen AI. So if we actually talk about Gen AI, yes, it can unlock a whole set of new use cases in the organization. But just by itself, it won't be able to. It need to, for Gen AI to use, you need to have a proper data, the right data for the Gen AI to use. What that means is you need to have a data platform within the organization. If the data platform is not available, maybe you cannot actually use, even though the technology is so good, right? Most of the companies right now, they don't necessarily have a proper data platform for the Gen AI to actually consume. So what really matters is implementing that data platform so that you can really unlock the value of Gen AI, right? And sometimes you need the Gen AI to encompass with the traditional AI and ML. So it is probably like there is a different AI and ML model that do the classification of a user or a customer, and then you're coming up with an investment proposal for that particular customer based on certain different information, right? So it is a combination of all of these can actually unlock a lot more innovation and revenue or the efficiencies as well.
Anything to add from your end, Lisa? Oh,
No, I think that pretty much covers it. I also feel like AI is definitely overused these days. There's definitely other technologies to be considered as well, and it's more important to understand what the use cases are and what the processes are that need to be eventually changed as well to fit to these new technology adoptions. And it's true, like you definitely leverage the adoption of AI for getting like clean up your own organization a little bit just to get governance of data straight, especially in large organizations that deal with sensitive data. Obviously, you need to be sure that certain AI models don't have access to certain data either, or are not sharing it with somebody who is not disclosed in that data. So in that sense, it will definitely help unblock certain obstacles, but it might also run the risk that we forget about other technologies and while focusing on AI.
okay. So we have one more question. Where do you see the future of fintech innovation heading in the next 5 years? How should corporations prepare to stay ahead of the curve? Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I can start. So I think startups have proven themselves that they can offer brilliant digital solutions for clients, for customers, may that be retail or institutional customers. And I think that's definitely what we have to brace ourselves for. If you're part of a corporate, that's definitely what you have to keep an eye out for. And the next 5 years, that's very specific, so hard to say. I think we didn't have quantum computing really on the map last year, but suddenly it's kind of imposed here in Singapore by the regulator to take it into consideration. So who knows what it'll be next year. So it's definitely going to be exciting to be part of this journey here in Southeast Asia or APAC as a whole. I think we're still struggling to keep our great fintechs in the region. I think most of them are unfortunately leaving towards the US. So that's definitely one opportunity we still have to kind of keep investing in fintech solutions locally that find adoption in the region.
Yeah, I think add to that with I mean, what happens with the Gen AI boom is the company started realizing that there is something that they can get out of AI. So Gen AI actually helps the companies adapt even the traditional AI and ML. Like some of the solutions that comes out to these banks right now is not necessarily powered by Gen AI. Maybe there's a smaller portion of Gen AI, but it comes in a backbone of a traditional AI and ML, even the data solution. So what I actually see is the next 2 years or so, mostly going to be inward facing efficiency improvements within the banks of the entire life cycle of the bank and entire different use business units of the bank. It could be from the front end, the customer care to the direct customer agents that are working in the bank itself physically to the back end in a call center to whoever processing the loan applications, things like that. So those efficiency improvements will actually come with AI innovations. And then it will actually move to the front facing where when you actually interacting with the bank, maybe you will not interact physically for a physical person, right? Rather, you will be interacting with an agent on one hand. So maybe when you actually sending your loan application 3 years from now, it will get automatically evaluated and then your loan is granted using an AI system. But that's the area or the innovation that I think that is going to happen, but not a massive scale in the next 2 years on the front facing, but a massive scale for the inward facing. The next 3 years of the 5 years would be maybe like front facing applications as well.
Great
Then
advice from both of you. So we have one more question from the audience.
two.
Will it be possible? Okay, sure. So let's go with that question. How should AI startups plan their roadmaps and solutions with the drastic changes in the AI world, especially with the giants in the industry? Yeah.
Uh, I mean, usually this is always a question that when you're actually working on any AI solution, the question normally comes is like, what if Google is doing it? Then what are you going to do, right? That is always a question. But you also need to understand the giants have their own roadmaps, right? OpenAI have their own roadmap, Google have their own roadmap. So not everyone is actually going through your use case, maybe, even though they can, right? Most of these big guys, likes of tech giants, Google, OpenAI, Facebook, or AWS, and so on, they actually play horizontally. They build tools or the technologies that can apply for multiple different applications or the use cases. So they don't specify a particular use case. They build technologies that can used for multiple different use cases, versus startups normally focus on vertical applications, where you focus on maybe a fintech industry. In the fintech industry, one particular sector, maybe it is a loan applications, right? So the entire debt market, maybe only that, so which is a subset of the fintech as well, right? So you specify a particular area, then you try to build technology tools out of like each of these different use cases within that sector. So that is normally what the startups do. So your disruptions are actually coming from another startup, maybe, right? What you can actually keep up with is the changes that are happening in the industry. You can leverage those changes. Maybe a new Gen AI model coming up. So instead of you're using an old Gen AI model, you actually adopt the new Gen AI model. Maybe a new data set coming up, right? So you can actually retrain your models for that one. That is how you can keep up with the changes that are happening. It's not necessarily that you have to adapt to every single change that is coming in as well, right? So you need to think about whether it is really going to help or not. And by having a Gen AI, you don't necessarily need to build a chatbot. Even though Gen AI can actually support the chatbot, maybe your simple use cases is a summarization, maybe extracting key action items from a conversation, right? You don't necessarily support a conversation just because the Gen AI can support it.
Yeah. Anything from your end, Lisa? Do you want to add in?
No, I think Kasun
No.
covered it
Okay.
really well.
Okay.
Take the next one,
So
Lisa.
Yeah, exactly. I can take the next one. Yeah.
one more question here. So what advice would you give to fintech startups looking to collaborate with large corporations? What are the do's and don'ts?
Yeah, so I think strategic alignment is really important. Understand what the pain points are of the corporates and whether you are able to address them with your solution. Don't overpromise. I think it's really important that you are aware of what you're capable of. You are an expert of the solution or the area that you're building in. Be very transparent about that. Building trust is all about that transparency of what each partner is able to deliver. Set clear goals and set success criteria. I think that I really like that, Kasun, that you mentioned that earlier, um, and that you really understand your counterpart. Like, who are you talking to? Is it the business sponsor? Is it the tech team within the corporation? Is it the compliance team? They might have all slightly different types of views on your solution or understanding of your solution. So really try to understand who are you speaking to, know your audience. And something that I also actually realized when talking with startups who are dealing with a large organization, document your engagements, especially in the early phases when you speak to multiple representatives of the organization or maybe even across borders, if they're international. Then make sure that you understand who you spoke to, which part of the business are they from, what was the last conversation about, because honestly, information travels faster for representatives of organizations with externals. Sometimes you learn about that your colleague also spoke to that startup, not from the colleague, but actually from the startup, and then the representatives in the organization might be in the position to connect the dots much easier if they understand who you've spoken to already and who they need to connect you with as a next step. So those are a few nuggets of wisdom. I hope that helps.
I think adding on top of that one, as you mentioned, I mean, drawing down the organization structure and then who you talk to and then who their reporting managers are and who's controlling the budget, all that is important. Sometimes you can actually get a POC budget from maybe an executive director, but for you to actually go through a full-fledged MVP or a product, you might actually need an MD level. So who's going to approve that budget next? Like, keep them warmed as the POC going on so that, when the time comes, you have a warmer contact rather than a cold contact, right? So that is important. And open communication is also important. And so if things go wrong in your implementation, just feel free to communicate it and then explain why it has happened. And if things are wrong or maybe a wrong mistake that it has done, just communicate them and then see how you can mitigate that in the next time.
Definitely. So, communication is the key for success. So, I believe that our audience would be really happy to hear from your experiences, and definitely this webinar would be really, really useful for everyone out there in our audience. So, with that, we are coming to the end of our first webinar. So, thank you for your questions, participants' questions. They were really useful to make this webinar much more interesting. And before we wrap up, I'm thanking Kasun and Lisa for taking your valuable time out of your busy schedule to come here today and join this webinar to share your thoughts with us today. Thank you once again for joining. And for our participants as well, we thank our participants because without them, this webinar wouldn't be there, because these engagements should be there to have a successful webinar. So we'll be sending out a survey form as well to gather your feedback. So your valuable inputs will be really helpful to improve our future events. So with that, we'll be ending our webinar, and make sure to follow us on our social media so that you can stay tuned with our latest news and upcoming events. So thank you for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you in our next webinar as well. Have a great day. Have a pleasant evening. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.